Hello. We have found out how to prepare for an interview. We've also looked at what kind of questions to prepare. We have looked at the importance of preparing for an interview, but the ultimate question is, how do you put across all this preparation, all the things that you want to tell your interviewer through the way you speak? Because interviewing is as much about behavior as about using the right words and the right language to get your message across. In this course and in these lectures, I have been focusing more on how to speak rather than on the behavioral aspects, even though we cannot really separate the behavioral from the linguistic whether we're looking at interviews or presentations or meetings. So we've tried to do them together. Now let's move on to, we've been looking at the languages, a language of meetings, language of presentations, and now it's high time we moved on to what kind of language do you use, how do you speak up in an interview. Please remember that companies want job candidates who are well spoken and articulate, and recruiters won't represent a job candidate if they don't match the client's profile. And the best people who are highly sought after are those who are succinct in the explanation of their work experience. So what are the things that create a problem in interviews? So Diane D. Resta, who's the author of Knockout Presentations, How to Deliver Your Message with Power, Punch and Pizzazz, and the president of D. Resta Communications, a New York City speech coaching and training firm, lists 6 things you should not do in an interview when you are speaking in an interview. The first one is using non-words. Many of us, we talked about non-words. By now you know what are non-words, and you all know your favorite non-words by now. The non-words, whenever we are nervous, remember, we tend to use non-words more often. So you must find out your non-words and stop using non-words. The second thing she lists is up-talk. What is up-talk? When you're trying to project yourself as something very extraordinary, you're overconfident, that's the other extreme to which you can go. Now the most common problem when one trains people for interviewing skills, one doesn't look at these issues. However, when one is speaking to learners whose first language is not English, one has to spend the same amount of time looking at one's language. And I have myself found out that all the confidence and, if I may say so, cockiness that I see in interviewees these days, it goes for a 6 the moment they start speaking, because many of them have memorized their answers to the questions, but they don't have the basic language skills. They make very stupid, very basic errors, grammatical errors. Nobody is going to give you marks for grammar, but it creates a certain profile of you. Like if a company is looking for an articulate person and your language is full of grammatical mistakes, that's not the person you're looking for, unless you're going for a completely technical job. Related to that is sloppy speech. You might be very fluent, you might speak correct English, but you're careless in the way you use language. That's sloppily. You're not careful about how you use words, not careful about the way you use language. That's another turn-off. The 5th turn-off, according to her, is speed talking. What is speed talking? Now, in interviews in particular, when we are under stress and we know that so much is at stake, we tend to instead of condensing information, we try to pack in a lot of information, we have a lot to say, and we know that interviewers are not going to give us all the time in the world. So we try to condense all the information in the minimum time, as little time as possible. The result is that you talk very fast, you're doing speed talking. Now yes, you sound very fluent and very articulate, and you've said what you wanted to say, but the interviewer hasn't really understood what you were trying to say. So they're trying to follow the details, they're trying to see what you're saying. So please don't indulge in speed talking. The last point is, according to her, weak speaking. What is weak speaking? When you don't use the appropriate words. You don't have the vocabulary, the right vocabulary, or you don't find the right words because you are nervous. So you tend to use terms, verbs, adjectives which are very weak and which take longer to say the same thing. So that's called weak speaking. Now we look at how you can get rid of these habits. First of all, become aware of your habits, whether it's the use of non-words. Jean Letts is talking about non-words, but it applies to all your linguistic skills, whether it's non-words or grammar or weak words or whatever. You must the first stage is to become aware, and you can do that by recording your speech. Not memorized speeches, not rehearsed speeches, but the way you normally speak, because you're not going to rehearse the exact answers. You're going to respond to the questions you are asked. So you need to do this as a habit. Good language skills, error-free language should become second nature to you, because when you are under pressure, you will make more mistakes. So you must first become aware of your own speech habits, the mistakes you make, by recording yourself. The second thing is to recognize the patterns. What kind of non-words do you use? What kind of grammatical mistakes you make? What pronunciation problems you have? So once you become aware of them, and once you recognize your patterns, maybe you can't overnight improve everything, but at least you can watch out for that. So whenever you think you anticipate that you're bound to use a filler word, you're about to make a pronunciation mistake, you can pause. It's all right to pause. We think, as I said earlier, we think that pausing creates an unfavorable impression in the listener's mind. Not really. The listener knows that you're thinking, so you may pause as you're waiting for the right word to come to you. Now we're going to look at three things. First, the reason why many of us who are good speakers, who are extremely articulate in our day-to-day conversations, we speak very confidently, we speak very fluently, we speak without errors, such people also tend to make mistakes when they are at interviews. They probably are not able to give their best, they trip for words, they stammer and stutter, they can't, they repeat, they're not able to find a strong word to say what they are saying, and the root of the problem is nervousness. We've talked about nervousness in different situations, in meetings, in presentations, but this is one situation where nervousness can be the absolutely clinching factor, and this is a situation where you're bound to be more nervous than in any other situation, because unlike in presentations, unless the presentation is part of the interview itself, you say, okay, I did not make a good presentation, but in this case it's a question of whether you get the job or you don't get the job. So you are much more nervous before an interview than you are before any other speaking situation. So what are the things that you can do to stop feeling nervous? These are tips which experts have shared with us. You can find these lists anywhere, but they've been given by people who are coaches, professional coaches, trainers, people who work in the area of communication, and I've compiled that list to see what are the things you can do, because each of us does different things and we have to find out what works for us. Somebody recommends positive self-talk, that I can do this, I am capable, I'm going to get this job. So that kind of positive self-talk, in several cases, I am the best, I know I can do it, I've been called for this interview because I went through the screening test and obviously the recruiters have found some good qualities in me. So think positive, do positive self-talking, I can do it, I can make it to the interview. The second thing, which we've been harping on time and again, is right breathing. And once again, the expert tells us, breathe slowly 10 times just before you face the interview. And see if it makes any difference to you, the right kind of breathing and breathing slowly. Does it relax you? Does it make you feel less tense? Along with breathing, as we did in presentation, release your muscle tension. Remember, when we are tense, we tend to tense up our shoulder muscles, our neck muscles, our facial muscles, and any tensing of the muscles, irrespective of where, hands, limbs, feet. So the moment we tense our muscles, the first impact is that the body language that we use is not very open. The second impact is that our voice itself is not very clear. It seems constricted. Our voice doesn't sound right if our muscles are tense. So relax your muscles, as we did before the presentations. Do some neck rolls, do some shoulder rolls, clench your fists, open your fists. Take all the tension out of your fists, your feet, your face, relax your facial muscles, and more important, visualize success. So fighting your nerves, as in the case of presentations, was half of it was your psychological part. How can you get over your fears? Through some positive thinking. And the second part is physiological, which is how to deal with the problems you have. So more important is the talking to yourself, your thinking. So the moment you start visualizing your success, that I'm going to get this job, I am made for this job, I'm going to get this, start visualizing it. Mind you, many times you might not get the job, but it's important that you come out looking, I gave my best. And leave the interviewers also, irrespective of whether they are in a, whether you are the person they found the best for the job or not, you left a very favorable impression on them. So visualize success. It happens that for a number of reasons, interviewers are not able to offer you the job, but they say, well, so and so was very impressive, and maybe in the next round, or if there's a vacancy turning up, or if the same interviewer shows up in another interview, he is bound to remember you. Release by writing. That is another thing you can do. Releasing by writing is not just means two things. One is write down what you're feeling and deal with your fears. The other is prepare your responses. I often do it myself when I'm facing an interview or a situation where something is very important. I try to compose my thoughts and put down my thoughts in writing, that this is, if I'm asked this question, I'm going to put this in writing, I'm going to say this, or how does this sound? Even better, it's even better if you can record yourself. I often do it before an important presentation. I record myself and listen to myself to see how do I sound, what is the impression I give when I speak. Is it acceptable? And even later, many times we do a review of how we appeared. If I repeat that behavior in the interview, I have a very objective kind of record of what I said wrong, and how I could have improved on it. So maybe on that, not on that particular time, but the next time I can work on it. There's nothing like physical activity to release your tension. So do whatever works for you. Take a leisurely walk. You can't obviously do pull-ups and push-ups, but you could walk around, you could do anything, physical movement, physical activity which takes away your tension. Don't have a heavy meal before your interview. Eat light, because who knows what you eat might interfere with your metabolism, your stomach, or it might even interfere with your you might feel sleepy. So eat light and hydrate. Drink lots of water, because when we are nervous, our mouth goes dry, and if we feel thirsty, we dry up. We're not able to speak. Our voice sounds very hoarse. Avoid coffee. We tend to drink coffee before we go in for anything important, but they say that coffee is the worst thing because it really makes you jittery. It doesn't soothe your nerves. So don't drink coffee before you go. But you could chew gum. Yes, don't chew gum in the interview room, but before you go for an interview, again, studies have shown that chewing gum can release tension. And finally, smile. There's nothing like a smile to make you feel better. Robin Kermode, who is the author of Speak So Your Audience Will Listen, 7 Steps to Confident and Successful Public Speaking, came out with a very crazy idea about how to get over your nerves in an article in The Guardian. What does he say? He says that you can do anything from stopping yourself shaking. So doing crazy things like tensing and relaxing your leg muscles, your hip muscles, do anything. Stop your voice from shaking. What do you do to stop your voice from shaking? What does he suggest? He suggests that you try to recite a stupid poem or a nursery rhyme like Humpty Dumpty slowly to yourself, so that will help your voice from shaking. Stand up while you wait. Normally when we are called for an interview, we are asked to take a seat, but what he suggests is avoid taking a seat, because you will have to rise to your feet. Instead of that, he says that if you stand, you will be at level with the interviewers. So when you are asked to sit inside, find your best sitting position in the interview room. Don't lean too much against the seat. We'll show you the right sitting positions in the video that follows. How do you sit in an interview for the best effect? How to not only to appear confident, so that you find your best voice. Show your hands. Now our tension manifests not only in our face, in our neck, in our shoulders, but mostly in our hands. So people who are tense tend to clench their fists. They find something to do with their hands. They hold on to their hands, and that's a big giveaway for the interviewer that this person is nervous. So, and also your body language doesn't appear open. So always show your hands, and it also allows you to gesture when you are speaking to people. Remember to make the other person speak special. Usually we have the tendency, because we are told that we have to get the best impression, give the best impression about ourselves, we tend to highlight our own achievements. So some of us tend to tom-tom about our achievements and make ourselves seem very important. But instead, you make the other person feel special by a single word or by the way you address them. Make them feel, by using the you tone, you make them feel that they are more important, not you. But the most important thing is to listen. You have to listen. Body language of the interviewer is important as the body language of the interviewee. And if you're clever, if you're smart, you know how to read the body language of the interviewers. Now, interviewers are very clever people. They try not to betray any sign of whether they like you or not through their facial expression or by telling you, but if you are sensitive and you are attentive to their body language, or when you're nervous, one of the things you can do is you can listen to them, observe them, and that will help you get over your own nervousness. I have this image of an interview I appeared in, and yes, I didn't get the job, but that body language remains with me to this date. There was a lady who was the subject expert who had a frown on. The moment I entered the room, she had a frown on her face, and the second person had a big smile. And much later I came to know that this lady did not, she was not in favor of giving me the job. So that I could read from her expression the moment I entered the room, from the annoyed face or the body, her frown on her face. I could make out that she is not favorably inclined towards me. So use your own voice. Don't try to use a fake voice when you are in an interview. A lot of people do that. They tend to adopt an interview voice. I recall interviewing a number of IIM students way back, and I was amused that a lot of the students who came, they came with such packed speeches. You ask them a question and there they were with their speeches in a perfect, flawless delivery. Almost like, the feeling I got was like those Miss India contestants when they win the crown, or when they are being interviewed, they make up these speeches about how they all want to be Mother Teresa's. So that was the kind of speeches they came up with. And I wasn't sure. I got the feeling that it was a very artificial way of speaking, but I said, okay, wow, this IIM students speak very well. But then I had an opportunity to interact with the students outside the class, and they spoke in a very different way. So that feeling that there was something not quite right about the way they were speaking, it was because they had faked an accent. Be yourself. Don't try to be anyone else. Remember all these things we are sharing in these lectures with you. Just remember, the ultimate thing is be yourself. Always, the people who stand out are always those who take the gamble and who always break the rules. So you need to know all the rules, only then you will be able to break the rules if you wish to. So, if you are writing, what is a writer supposed to do? Today all the writers want to start writing without reading, but all the old classic writers that we know of, they read up everything possible under the sun. They read up all the writers from the beginning of the history of their literature before they started writing their own novels or their own poetry or their own plays. But so now how does a writer stand out from another writer? Because if you they begin by imitating other writers, by trying to write like somebody else, but as they find their own voice, they stop imitating. Then they do something different, and they can do this something different only because they know the rules. So only if you know the rules can you break the rules. Now I come to the second part of speaking in an interview, a very ignored part. We tend to, when we are preparing for interviews, we tend to focus on important questions. And these days you have these quick guides on how to answer standard questions, the 10 important questions or the 20 important questions in an interview, and we all rehearse them. So when I listen to these answers, I get a very strange feeling, because I feel that they are rehearsed, and indeed they are rehearsed. But what happens if an interviewer asks you a question which is out of the box, which is not one of the standard questions? That's where your real fluency, your real communication skills show up. That's where people come to know whether you're really articulate or you have just memorized these questions, as students tend to do these days. So the first thing which connects with the point I made earlier, that remember, interviewers are also human beings. Their idea is not to make you scared and to make you feel nervous. The whole idea is to help you. It's helping you to answer the questions in the best possible way by helping you to get over your nervousness. So what do the interviewers do? What do they do in order to make you feel less nervous? They indulge in what is called small talk, and I myself do it. Whenever I notice a young person in particular is very nervous, I try to make some small talk with them so that they can get over their nervousness. So researchers led by Brian Sweiter at Scheller College of Business at the Georgia Institute of Technology have examined mock interviews with 163 undergrads, and they published the result in British Psychological Society Research Digest. In this they suggest that the impression you make during those first minutes of seemingly idle chit-chat, what researchers call rapport building, has a big influence on your interviewer's overall perception of you. And this is corroborated. I can second this. I myself have observed this. It's a small talk in which one forms an impression about the candidate. So what are the steps to small talk? The first step to making small talk is stick to safe small topics, the weather, sports, or how bad the traffic is. Step 2 is do not overpraise. So usually interviewers would ask you a question like, suppose you've traveled a long way and they ask you, how was your journey? Did you have a problem finding the place? So they would ask you a very simple question, and what do you do? What are you supposed to do in that small talk? Now it's not a cue. It's not a cue for you to remember, the interviewer is just trying to find out, help you relax, and just trying to find out something little bit about you. So maybe where you live or how far do you live. Now that is not the time to tell you how you got to tell the interviewer how you got caught in the traffic jam and how it took you 2 hours to get there. There's no need to do that. So there are some topics which interviewers usually use, safe topics like the weather, sports, traffic, and so on. Whenever you ask a question like that, understand that the interviewer is trying to make you feel relaxed, and use these to relax. In fact, use it to relax. I recall being asked in an interview, I had put German on my CV as one of the languages I speak, or I have cleared some, I've got some certificates in German language. Now the first question, the small talk question which was put to me by the person who was chairing the panel was, Setzen Sie sich bitte. Now what did it tell me? With a smile. Now I understood that he's trying to make me feel comfortable by asking me this simple question, but I also understood that he's trying to test whether I remember my German or I have forgotten it. So I'm not supposed to start a conversation in German, but just respond in German. That's enough for the person to be convinced that you do recall your German, you do remember your German, and also it gives me time to, it makes me relax because it's the chairperson himself who's asking me. Step 2 is do not overpraise. This doesn't happen in panel interviews, but in one-to-one interviews very often we can make small talk by making a comment as an icebreaker by saying, oh, your room is lovely, or that's a nice picture on the wall. So we can make we can use questions like, we can use starters like this. Step 3, jump on any comment made by the same party. So the moment you say, oh, I am from such and such college, the interviewer sees it on your CV and says, he went to the same college that you did. Or if he mentions that you have some common interests, Now you can take it into a very short conversation, but doesn't mean that you carry on a parallel conversation with this particular interviewer because he has been in the same college with you. He or she is doing it just to make you feel comfortable. Make sure you look interested even if the topics discussed are not interesting. Step 5 is avoid bringing up anything related to the job itself. Now this is the time, it's like every business meeting, every business conversation must ideally, whether it's a meeting, whether it's a presentation, it must devote a little part of the first few minutes to social conversation, to what is called small talk, and the idea is to break the ice, to strike a rapport. But and this is obviously not the time to start talking business. Don't bring up any issue related to the job itself. So again in small talk, listen for keywords, stay positive, show some interest in the interviewer, look for conversational cues, be very observant as to your surroundings in an interview situation, because the interview setting will likely offer some ideas for light, easy conversation. Bring the small talk, and before you end the small talk, the interview is wrapping up and you're both saying goodbye, circle back to the very beginning of the interview and riff off the initial light banter between you two. Like somebody says, oh, I go to the same sports club as you, so you could say, well, let's meet in the club, or I'm looking forward to the next match, or whatever. So you can also bring the small talk full circle. Now I'm quickly going to go through what kind of phrases you can use in business English. In small talk, I won't have time to go into all of them, but let's look at some sample ones. So suppose you're talking about the weather. You could say, it's a bit cold this time of the year, isn't it? It's a bit warm for this time of the year. How about this weather? Beautiful day, isn't it? How's the weather in the city when you left? So you ask questions of this kind. It looks like it's going to snow. Lovely weather, isn't it? Now, when you're looking at how to speak effectively in an interview, you don't need to memorize grammar drills. You don't have to practice grammar just before the interview. That is something which should become natural to you, and that's a long-term plan. If you have poor grammar, you must do it well before. You must peg up your grammar skills in general. Don't study grammar too much. Learn and study phrases instead. And listening is not enough. How do you build a vocabulary? Now I find students building a vocabulary by looking at lists, memorizing the lists and looking up the answers. Those lists are helpful in helping you answer the verbal questions in the exam. Or many of us read a lot, we listen to others, but we are shy when it comes to using words. So many of us have a very extensive passive vocabulary. That is because we have been reading, we have been listening to others, but when we are asked to speak, our vocabulary is very limited because we haven't put it to use. So whenever you come across a new word, whenever you read something, whenever you hear something, try to use those words. Use a very simple trick which one of my students followed and had a wonderful vocabulary, active vocabulary by the end of the course. If you come across 5 new words in writing, make a list. Make a list of 5 new words in writing and 5 new words in listening or speaking. Now try to find out the meanings of these words, and more important, use these words. Use these words like children do. Whenever children learn any new word, they are so fascinated by the word that you will find them using that word throughout the day, and this is the way they never forget the word. So use the words. Submerge yourself. How do you submerge yourself? Most of us think that improving our communication skills or appearing confident in formal situations is something we pull on and pull off, and that's why we don't relate it to our everyday life. So the way when we said you must come across as yourself, as you, what do you need to do? That you is not different from the you which you are normally. It's a you which is the same throughout. And to be that you who's confident, who's articulate, who has a good vocabulary, you need to submerge yourself. You must hang out with people who have a good vocabulary, who have very good speaking skills. And mind you, you will find your own vocabulary, your own language improving miraculously if you just listen to them and repeat, use their language. Listen carefully and actively repeat. Use the same kind of language in your own conversation. Mind you, this happens to me. The moment I'm with a group which is articulate, my own speech habits change, because unconsciously I'm listening to them, I'm also mirroring them. So do that. Study correct material. You must also, in order to build your language and your vocabulary, you must read a lot. You must read the best writers. You can read serious literature, you can read classics, or you can even read non-fiction, or you can read motivational books, but do make reading a part of your everyday life. Now, I'm going to run through some of these phrases quickly for the typical questions you get, but I won't have time to go into all the questions. So what are the phrases? Think of some of the phrases you can use for describing yourself. I was born and raised in, I attended the university, I've just graduated from, I've worked for, I enjoy playing. So tell me about yourself. The first question, what are the phrases you can use? I attended MIT, I grew up in Korea, I'm an easygoing person, I'm a hard worker, I've always liked being balanced. And how do you talk about your strengths? I've always been a great team player. I believe my strongest trait is, I realized my strength is, I pay close attention to, I am an excellent, I am a troubleshooter, I'm good at, I'm self-motivated, I have very good. And what are your strengths? I believe my strongest trait is my attention to detail. I've always been a great team player. Okay, so this is the way you can answer. Use phrases, the kind of phrases to be able to answer questions. Expressions for talking about your weaknesses. I feel my English ability is my weakest trait. I always try to solve my own problems. I'm overzealous. I become nervous. I tend to spend too much time. Sometimes I have trouble delegating duties. So this might be bad, but in college I found I procrastinated a lot. I feel my weakness is not being detail-oriented enough. I feel my English ability is my weakest trait, the weakest trait I struggle with. So you can use these phrases to talk about your weaknesses. What about what kind of position are you looking for? I'm looking for a position in which I am interested in, I'm more interested in, I'm more interested in. I want to take on more responsibility. I'm convinced that the name of the firm. I want to further my career. I am impressed. Where do you see yourself 5 years from now? 5 years from now, I'd like to see myself in a management position. 5 years from now, I want to be a senior sales manager. So what extracurricular activities are you involved in? I was involved in. I was very active in. Besides studying, I played, I was involved with a group. So you must pay attention to these details, like when you ask, why should the company hire you? You should say, you should hire me because I'm confident. There are 2 reasons I should be hired. I'm a perfect fit for this job. I should be hired. I think I'm a great match for this position. So we've looked at 3 things when talking, focusing on speaking, specifically focusing on speaking in this lecture. We looked at 3 aspects. One was, the first part of speaking is get over your fears. Second part is how to use small talk to relax, because the small talk also gives away a lot about you to interviewers. And the third part is how to use phrases to ask particular kinds of questions. In the role plays we have for you, you will watch all these things at work, and we'll ask you to analyze how the people who played those roles, to what extent they were successful in using these phrases or maintaining the right body language or using small talk if there was any. Thank you.